I hope you all are studying well and you all are studying for your entire syllabus properly. Yes, Shreya, I read your query. Let me just start the session because I have a topic at hand which is slightly heavy. So I'll start the session, and just as a break sort of a thing in between the session, we can just have a discussion on your query also. So allow me that much time, Shreya. So I read your query. I haven't seen that question from the module, but fine. We can discuss the answer somewhere in between our session. So students, let us start our topic. So we are on a very exhaustive but a very interesting topic in the GST law, which is exemption. So understand this, students. Whenever, yes, good evening, Ginny, good evening, Hemant. So students, let us understand and appreciate this point that whenever you are studying a taxation law is designed on one of the two models. The first approach is the selective approach, where specifically the taxable object is identified, like it was once in the service tax era before 2012, where the Finance Act 1994, Chapter 5, which was the service tax law, had listed down the services on which tax would be levied. So there was a list of services on which the tax would be levied. So automatically for all remaining services, there would be no tax because they were not covered in the list on which tax was supposed to be levied. This is called as the selective approach. As against this, the other approach, which is generally followed everywhere, be it income tax, be it customs, be it GST, be it excise, and the later service tax law post 2012, is the comprehensive approach. Under this comprehensive approach, the tax is levied by firstly including everything in the tax levy. So as we have seen, we include taxable object, goods and services. We include taxable event supply. Everything is firstly covered in the tax levy. Then certain things are excluded by way of exclusion from definition of goods and services like money and securities. Then certain things are excluded from the supply by way of Schedule 3. And then finally, whatever is left after excluding these items from the taxable object or the taxable event, the final remaining, which is a very huge, you can say, ambit, everything is covered in the levy first. However, it is important to understand that we are in a welfare state. What do you mean by welfare state? Where the government has to also keep in mind that we need to think about certain sectors, certain persons, certain goods, where, or even services, where there is a need that you do not collect tax. And that is ensured by way of introducing what is called as exemption. So exemption is a concept which is there to temporarily. Why I'm using the word temporarily, that I'll come to the point when we go to the technical discussion. But for the time being, just listen to this particular point. So exemption is a mechanism whereby temporarily you are given a relief from the tax. And how it is relieved? You are covered in the levy. So the law applies to you. Only for the time being, you are not required to pay the tax. That is what is exemption. Now, what is very important, I emphasize on this point, you are covered in the levy, the law applies to you. So if you would have studied, and if you remember the procedural part of GST, which you would have studied at inter level and also studied and practiced in your offices, in your articleship, you would remember that even for exempt supplies, once you are registered, it has to be reported in your returns. You have to prepare proper documents. In fact, there is a separate bill which is called as bill of supply to be prepared for exempt supplies. It means the law recognizes this as an important element. That is why I said only tax collection for the time being is stopped. But otherwise, this is there in the subject, in the law, and the entire act applies to it. In fact, if you recall the definition of aggregate turnover, which we check every time whenever we have to decide the turnover limit for registration or turnover limit for composition or for e-invoicing, anything, we also include the value of exempt supplies. So that is what is important to understand. Ki exempt is not something which is outside the law. The law applies, the law very well covers exempt supplies in their ambit. I hope this basic introductory background is clear. Now we proceed with the detailings of this particular topic, which is exempt supplies or exemptions. These are the parallel terminologies used. If anybody wants to share something on the exemptions or exempt supplies, feel free to raise your hand. We can have a short discussion and then we will proceed. Anybody wants to highlight or say something about this? No? Okay.
There is
So,
something called, sir, there is something called nil rate of tax, nil rate of tax, which is
uh-huh,
there in the definition of exempt supply.
right.
So, my understanding is there should be some kind of a schedule which will say for these supplies there is a nil rate of tax, and the rest will be covered under exemption, which is under the section 11 and section 6 of CGST and IGST Acts.
Okay.
So I do not know how will you, because that is my understanding. I didn't find any schedule or any list which has nil rate of tax.
I'll tell you. Good question. So let me first then take you all to the definition so that everybody will understand what we are going to discuss. So what we are going to discuss is this definition of exempt supply under the GST law, which is defined under section 2, clause 47. It defines exempt supply to mean three types of supplies. Now, what is interesting to note, dear students, is that the first integral part of the exempt supply is that it has to be a supply first. So if you remember the point with which I started, firstly, you have to see the levy. Certain things are excluded from the levy itself. Why? Because they are removed from goods, they are removed from service, or they are removed from supply. Now, those things will not find place in the levy, that is section 9. And once they do not find place in the levy, there is no need to come and check whether they are exempt supplies or not. Because in order for anything to be a supply, to be an exempt supply, it has to be a supply first. If it is not a supply, there is no question of checking whether it is exempt or taxable anything. So by default, you can say those items which are not a supply, there is no tax on that also. But the reason is different. It is outside the levy. And the items which we are going to study now, they are not leviable because they are covered in the definition of exempt supply. So first point that I wanted to highlight here is that for anything to be termed as an exempt supply, you have to remember that you have to first pass the test of being a supply, which we studied in section 7, read with through different types of schedules 1, 2, 3, and all the definitions of goods, service, business, everything. Now, once you are a supply, you will be termed as an exempt supply if either the rate which is applicable to you is nil. So you attract nil rate, fine. Or you attract some rate, which may be 5, 12, 18, 28, but you are put in the exemption list. Now, exemptions could be part or full. Generally in GST, everything is full exemption. Prior to that, in service tax, there was a concept of part exemption even in excise. Here in GST, anyways, we have full exemption, but still they have clarified, they have emphasized this because in future you may even have part exemptions in GST. Now, second thing which would be considered as an exempt supply are those supplies which are wholly or completely exempted. And the third thing which is covered is those items which are a non-taxable supply. Now, this is again interesting. They have again used the word supply. So it has to be a supply first, and then we will see whether it is a taxable or a non-taxable supply. So it has to be a supply first. So even those items which are exempt supplies, they have to be supply first. Similarly, those items which are non-taxable supplies, also, sorry, has to be supply first. Now, this interesting question will come. Ki, sir, what is a non-taxable supply? So we'll go to that definition. So non-taxable supply is defined. It is defined in section 2, clause 78 to mean this. So what is non-taxable supply? Means a supply of goods or service or both, which is not leviable to tax, that is, which is outside section 9. So see the beauty. First is certain things are excluded. Why? Because they are neither goods nor service or they are not supply. So anyways, those are outside the levy itself. Why? Because they are not fitting in the definition of goods, service, supply because of the conditions or the requirements or the schedules. So they are anyways outside the levy. They are no supply items. There is no tax on that also. Then second come those items which fulfill these tests. And then you come to section 9 to check the charge, to check the levy. And in 9, you come to know that 9.1 specifically says that GST would be levied on all intrastate supplies if you are studying CGST, SGST, but it says except alcoholic liquor. And 9.2 says that 5 petroleum items will not be leviable to tax. Now they would be levied at a future date. So when you come to 9, you come to know that, okay, there are certain items which are supply. Why? Because they are goods or service and they satisfy the test of being a supply. Still, they are non-taxable supplies. Why? Because they are not satisfying 9 conditions. Because 9 has either specifically excluded, the example is alcoholic liquor, or 9.2 says that we are deferring it like the 5 petroleum products. So basically, these 6 items, your alcoholic liquor and the 5 petroleum products, these are the 6 items which, when sold by someone, would fit in the concept of non-taxable supply. I hope firstly non-taxable is clear. Yes, Mansa. Yes, Hemant, you both are correct. If possible, if you all can put the message, try to put it in the your regular to everyone if it is allowed, so that everyone will come to know what we are discussing. So we are discussing exempt supply, and in exempt supply, we first understood what is a non-taxable supply. So non-taxable supplies for the time being are 6 items, right? Now, coming to the next point, what is nil-rated and what is wholly exempt? Because these are the other 2 items which are also covered in the definition of exempt supply. Here, the question that came to me was, Ki sir, where is the schedule for nil rated or how do we get to know? So let us understand. What is nil rated? Nil rated means where in the rate schedule, the rate that is put against that particular item is nil. Now this you will find in the rate notification for goods. So if you want to find out where this is given, you have to go to the rate notification of goods. Within rate notification of goods, you will find category as nil, 5%, 12%, 18%, 28%. So nil rated, this list or this schedule is the rate schedule for goods. So I hope I answered this point. Now the next question was regarding the wholly exempt. Where do we find this? So this is what you find by way of a notification. So by way of a notification, certain supplies, even though having some tax in the rate schedule. So firstly, either in the rate schedule itself, the rate is nil. So that will be exempt supply. Or in the rate schedule, there is some rate, 5, 12, 18, something. But that item is finding place in the exemption notification, which we are going to discuss. Then also that transaction, that supply becomes exempt supply. Mansa is saying, sir, recent Supreme Court judgment says alcohol for industrial use is state subject, allows the state to regulate tax. Does it mean only excise duties to be levied? Okay. See, firstly, Bada, I'll just request you to check the decision which you are referring to, because if alcohol is for industrial use, then firstly the question is whether it is leviable to GST or not. My first question. Then I'll come to this question of whether it is a state subject. So whether alcohol for industrial use is state subject, is this the decision saying, Mansha? Or whether alcohol for human consumption is a state subject, this is what the decision saying. So Mansha, I'll request that you just revisit the decision so that, or you can just share the citation if possible. If I can find it out in my resource, we can open and check over here, because the point is that alcoholic liquor for human consumption is only what is right now covered in the state list, that is list 2. And then what you are saying is correct. It means the old taxes are continuing, which is the old excise and VAT. And that is why it is outside the GST levy. Okay. So you have shared some link. I'll just why it is not opening. Hmm. Apex Court upholds states' right to regulate taxes or industrial alcohol. It is a big victory for State Supreme Court on Wednesday. 8-1 majority upheld states' right to regulate taxes or industrial alcohol. This decision is 23rd October. The court stated that industrial alcohol falls within the meaning of intoxicating liquor. Yes. So please understand this, beta. See, what's the point? The point is, it is not the point that it is industrial alcohol, because it is a very specific, I mean to say, the fact specific decision. Because whether that particular item will fall in the state list, that is list 2, or it will go to GST, that is decided by whether that item is intoxicating or not. So I'm just reading the judgment from the link that you have shared, that if it is an intoxicating item, Hemant, so what you are referring to, I did not get. They have added rectified spirit, which is used to manufacture alcohol for human consumption. I did not get your point, Hemant. Ah, so Mansa, what I'm trying to explain is, so in this decision, what you are saying is correct. They have mentioned that industrial alcohol will fall in state. But the point is, reason is important. Reason is that it is having that intoxicating effect, which is what is the state subject. So it is not necessary that every industrial alcohol will fall over here, because many items which are used in industry for manufacturing various types of drugs, like for example, we have these cough syrups. They also have some element of alcohol. So that is where it will not be falling in the state list, it will be coming to the GST. So what is important is the reasoning that they have given. So I'm just reading that paragraph. The bench indicated that the meaning of intoxicating liquor under entry 8 of the state list extends beyond the narrow definition of alcoholic beverage or portable alcohol, includes all type of alcohols that have adverse effect on the public health. So this is what is important. So alcoholic liquor and intoxicating liquor are used for consumption, but the entry of intoxicating liquor extend to its manufacturing, etc. So alcoholic liquor is defined by its ingredients and intoxicating is defined by its effects. Thus, alcoholic liquor can be classified under the latter if it causes intoxication. The public interest purpose is evident from the construct and the evolution of the entry, the court stated. So I hope you got the particular point. So it is, we cannot generalize this, because see, there are different types of liquor that are a product from industry, or that are also a raw material for various products from industry. So we cannot generalize and say that all this will be falling in the exemption. I hope I made the point, Bida. But it is good that you pointed out this point so that we could have a discussion with everyone. Sir, they have added rectified spirit, which is used for alcohol. This is excluded, should come under non-taxable category. Correct. So if it is excluded, it is non-taxable category. Shreya is saying it will be different from alcoholic liquor for human consumption. Yes, Shreya, see, that is what this particular case, I hope you all can see my screen. So this is what this particular case is highlighting. See, for this, you have to again go and read entry 8 of Schedule 7, List 2, which deals with the power of the state to impose taxes on what? On these items which are alcoholic liquor or which are in the nature of intoxicating liquor. So that is what they have clarified, that we are not only going to take those liquors which human consume directly because that is having an intoxicating effect. Even if there is some industrial liquor which has an intoxicating effect, that will also be covered. And once it is covered in this entry 8, it will go to the state subject and it will become a state matter. And then obviously, if it becomes a state matter or state subject, it will be outside GST. That is what is the point. So you're right, Mansa. Okay. Now, coming back to our discussion point. So what we are discussing is three things are considered as exempt supplies under GST. One, where in the rate schedule, and where is this rate schedule? It is the rate schedule of goods. You will find the nil items. Second, where they are wholly exempt, where you will find this? You will find it in various notifications. Notification 12 of central tax and notification 9 of integrated tax. This is what we are going to study today. And third is non-taxable supplies. What are non-taxable? Broadly, there are 6 items. Fine. So here they have given a broad overview as to what are those goods which are kept in the nil rate. So generally, these are the essential goods or those items which are for your day-to-day basic necessities that have been put in the nil rate. Now, here we are trying to understand on what criteria exemptions are granted. So exemptions may be granted on one of these criteria. One, it may be specific to certain activities or transactions. So we can call it that it is a transaction specific exemption, or it may be to specified suppliers. So whatever they supply is in material, but we want to grant exemption to that supplier. For example, your schools, colleges. Third, it may be recipient specific. So where a particular thing is given to a particular recipient, then it would be exempt. Or fourth, where it is requiring both aspects, that the supplier should also be a particular person, recipient should also be a particular person. So these are broadly the 4 categories, or you can say the 4 broad groups in which all the exemption entries can be classified. One, transaction specific, where supplier recipient may not be so important. Then supplier specific, recipient specific, and where certain transactions where supplier and recipient both have to be the specified persons. I hope this is clear. So these are the 4 broad categories. Now, before we go to these exemption entries in detail, let us first go to the section which empowers the grant of exemption. Now, here it is interesting to understand one thing. What is that one thing? If you go to the Income Tax Act, which you all have studied at inters also, and you all are studying in finals also, you will find that exemption is provided in the Act itself. So all the exemption entries of income tax are covered in the Income Tax Act Section 10 itself. So Section 10 of the Income Tax Act, by way of virtue of all the clauses, 10 bracket 1, 10 bracket 2, 10 bracket 2A, 10 bracket 3, 4, 4A, 4B, 4C, 4D, 5, 6. It provides you exemptions. However, when you come to indirect taxes, I'm not only talking about GST, I'm saying indirect taxes like the earlier excise or earlier service tax, today's customs, today's GST, you will find that exemptions are given in notifications. That is, they are granted by way of notification. The entire exemption list, what we can call as, is given in some notification. Now, an interesting point to discuss before I go to the topic in detail. What is the difference between the exemption of income tax and the exemption of indirect tax? Exemption of income tax, as I said, is given in the Act itself. So the authority to decide what should be exempt, what should not be exempt is with the Parliament. And any change in the exemption, adding an exemption, removing an exemption, amending an exemption, will be done by the parliament. Whereas when you come to indirect taxes, where exemption is given in the notification or by way of notification, by way of some order, the power rests with the government. Obviously, in GST, everything is you'll read on recommendation of council, that is fine. But the most important thing is that you need not pass it by way of a bill or by way of an amendment in the parliament. The government can do it by itself. This is what is the difference in indirect tax and direct tax exemptions. So direct tax, any exemption, it will happen only by amendment in the act. Here, it would be by way of amendment in the notification or by introducing a notification, and the power to do so rests with the government, both at the central level, at the state level. Now the question is, from where does government get this power? So government gets this power through the act itself. So now Hemant is asking a very good question, sir. Why? Now this is what is more important. Why I triggered this discussion was because I wanted to bring this point to your notice that there is a difference. And why I brought this point to your notice? Because I also wanted to highlight this question, why? See, understand one thing. Why you will find that certain things are there in income tax and certain things are not there. The same things are not there in the indirect taxes or vice versa. And most importantly, how they are there. Like as I gave you an example, the exemption is in the act itself in income tax, but in all indirect taxes, it is not that it is happening only in GST. In all indirect taxes, it is by way of notification, which is the prerogative of the government. Now, why is this difference? The reason is, please understand and appreciate, students, the power to make change in the act is with the parliament, because act is the tool of the parliament, whereas for issuing a notification or an order, it can be done by the government. Now the point is, why is this difference? Because income tax, anything is to be done annually. So it has to be done once in a year when you are computing your income and income tax and filing the returns. That's it. But indirect tax is such a thing which is required every moment. Even at this point of time, when I'm providing a service and you are receiving a service, there is immediately indirect tax levy. So indirect tax is a subject which has implications on regular basis, daily basis, in fact, every moment basis. Now, anything in income tax can be decided by the parliament at their leisure. Parliament meets in different sessions, like presently we have the winter session going on. You have the budget session after this. You have the monsoon session. So you have multiple sessions. In fact, there can be even special sessions if required, emergency sessions if required. So parliament is meeting in the year for 4 times, 3 times. Now, in this particular case, please take this point in mind that in case of indirect tax, where the decisions have to be taken regularly, like for exemptions, like for rate changes, like for different type of procedures, we cannot wait for the parliament session to start, because certain things may have to be decided on emergency basis, if not on emergency basis, but on priority basis, or let us say, I'll use the word on urgency basis. In such a case, we cannot wait for the parliament session, which may happen after 3 months, 4 months gap, or in case of election year, it may even get delayed. In such a case, we have this particular point that all these things in indirect taxes, you'll find that majority things. Now, observe this. When you have studied income tax law, how much of notifications you have referred? Hardly, very few. But when you are studying the GST law, majority things that you are studying is from some or the other notification. You are studying parallelly the GST rules, but you have not studied parallelly the income tax notifications or the income tax rules on regular basis, right? So this is the difference, that where they feel that something has to be done urgently, it has to be by the government only, which is working 24/7. And that is why, Hemant, This difference is there in direct and indirect tax. Fine. Now, okay. Now, Section 11 of the C and S and Section 6 of the I. These empower the respective government, whether center or state as the case may be, to grant exemption. And how this is given? This power is given by asking them either to issue a notification for granting exemption or to give exemption by issuing an order. Now, what is the difference between a notification or an order? The difference is where the exemption is general. General means it is not person specific. It is case specific. It is transaction specific. It is supplier or recipient specific. But it is not person specific. It is not for Vishal Poddar. Then it will be given by notification. So let us say they want to exempt all healthcare services or healthcare services. So then it can be anyone, whether Vishal Poddar is giving healthcare or whether ICAI is giving healthcare. I'm just giving an example. Healthcare given by Vishal Poddar will not be exempt because Vishal Poddar has to be a doctor that in that case. But what I mean to say, it is not person specific. But where it is person specific, where it has to be given in a particular case, like they want to exempt ICAI only in particular, then it can be done only by way of a special order. But where they want to exempt trade and professional bodies, then it will be by way of notification where ICAI will also get covered. But where they want to give exemption to ICAI only for any particular thing, it would be by way of an order. So that is what is the difference. So where exemptions are general exemptions, which are there, majority of our exemptions, what we are studying are general only. Hardly there is one or two specific exemptions, which is by special order. All are by notifications. Now, these exemptions may be absolute or they may be conditional. So what are absolute exemptions? Absolute exemptions are exemptions where they say that, okay, once you are doing this or once you are this, what you are doing is exempt. That is absolute. And what is important is absolute exemptions are compulsory. Sorry. As opposed to this, the other category is where the exemptions are subject to conditions. We call them as conditional exemptions. Now, conditional exemptions cannot be compulsory because if you do not want to avail the exemption, it is simple, do not satisfy or fulfill the conditions. So where exemptions are coming with some riders that, okay, if you want exemption, do this, then it is conditional. Where exemption says, okay, if you are this or if you are doing this, it is exempt, it is general or absolute. Now, when an exemption is absolute, it is compulsory. Like for educational institution or for healthcare services, for all this, the exemption is absolute. When I say absolute, it means I have not kept condition that if you do this, then exempt. If you don't do this, then not exempt. This is what is conditional. It is not if or but. It is okay. Are you this? Are you doing this? Exempt. I have not put a condition. Yes, obviously there would be definitions, there would be some detailing out as to what is exempt, what is not exempt, but that is not condition. That is a list. Okay, if you are this, if you are doing this, it is exempt. What is conditional? Where I put an option itself that, okay, if you do this, then exempt. That is, I am giving you a choice. That is where it is conditional, and conditional exemptions obviously are not compulsory because you don't want exemption, you don't satisfy the conditions. Now, the important point. When I said absolute is compulsory, it means the moment you are education institution, the moment you are healthcare, you have to, by default, take exemption. That is, you have to prepare your bill without charging GST. You cannot say that, okay, even though I'm exempt, let me go by the other option, because the first option is if I'm taking exemption, I will not get ITC. But I want to take ITC, so let me do one thing. Let me take ITC and also I will charge GST, but this is not allowed if the exemption is absolute. That is what I'm saying. Absolute exemptions are compulsory. So I hope this is clear. So the difference between 1 and 2 is 1 is general exemptions, 2 is specific exemptions given by special orders. Now, subsection 3 says that after issuing the notification or the order, as the case may be, wherever the government feels that they need to clarify something in that exemption. Generally, what needs to be clarified? Either the scope, who all are covered, or the applicability, when it will be applicable, when not applicable, because after a notification comes, there are many questions, doubts raised by the industry. In such a case, the government may decide to grant a clarification. How this clarification would be given? This clarification would be given by inserting an explanation where in the respective notification or the order, as the case may be. So if the exemption was granted by way of notification, the explanation is added in that notification itself. If exemption is granted by way of an order, the explanation is added in the order itself. So for for clarifying any doubts or any questions about the scope or applicability, the government may come up with this clarification in the form of an explanation. Now, the main question is what subsection 3 intends to provide is that if the government has inserted some explanation which clarifies that, okay, healthcare will include this and will not include this. The first question that comes is, from what date this clarification, this explanation would take effect? Whether it would take effect from the date of explanation or whether it would take effect retrospectively from the date when the original notification was issued. Because this is not an amendment. See, understand, there is no amendment in that notification or in that entry. They are simply clarifying it. For this, subsection 3 says that if this notification, which is now to be clarified, the clarification in the form of explanation is given within 1 year. 1 year of what? 1 year of issue of the notification, or in the case of order, 1 year from the date of issue of the order, as the case may be. If the explanation is inserted within 1 year, it will have effect retrospectively, that is from the date of original notification or order. So where explanation is added in the notification within 1 year of issuing the notification, it will have a retrospective effect, that is from day 1. However, indirectly, impliedly, reading between the lines, this subsection 3 also means that where this particular amendment is done after a year, in that particular case, it will not have effect retrospectively, it will have effect prospectively. I hope this point is clear with everyone. So this is what
if tax is already collected, what will happen to that tax?
That is a good question. Now see, nowadays, that is why whenever the government is coming up with some circular clarification, it is also giving you what should be done of the past cases. In such cases, generally they say that, okay, if by chance you have done something in past which is contrary, let it be on as is where is basis, that is, we will not change. So generally they come up with this clarification also. Nowadays they have started doing this, because your point is very correct that what will happen if I have already collected tax and later on by clarification I come to know that tax was not collectible. So first is they clarify at this time itself while giving explanation what has to be done for the past cases. One, if not, if nothing is clarified, then as per the rule of law, the amount which is collected and paid as tax has to be refunded back. Because if the amount or if that transaction is exempt, that amount is not taxable, then anything collected as tax on that amount or on that transaction becomes ultra vires. So in that particular case, if nothing is specified in this explanation that what should be done of past cases, generally nowadays they are coming by way of circular and clarifying that, okay, whatever in past is done, forget that. If you have paid tax, fine, that is also correct. If you have not paid tax, that is also correct. You follow that. That is, we call it a as is where is basis, no change basis. So what you say, status quo basis. If nothing is clarified, then the rule is refund. Now the interesting question is how to get refund and who will get refund. The answer to this is, please understand, the refund will be allowed only to the person who bears the burden of tax. This is the principle of unjust enrichment. Now, it would have happened that as a supplier, you have already charged, collected, and deposited the tax, but it has not gone out of your pocket because you have collected it from the customer. In such a case, it has to be refunded to the customer. And if the customer is not traceable, then the amount of tax will be transferred to consumer welfare fund. Even the government cannot keep the amount of tax because it will be unjust enrichment even for the government, because if something is exempt, government is also not entitled to keep the money on that particular amount. So I hope this is clear. Okay, perfect. Anybody has any questions, doubts, please feel free to ask. Now, as we discussed, for understanding the exemption for goods, as I mentioned, you have to go to the rate notifications, because the rate notification for goods has generally the nil rate. So in case of goods, you'll generally find the exemption in the form of nil rate. And this nil rate is given in the rate notification, which is not part of our syllabus, but definitely you can visit the CBIC website. And from there, you can go through that notification where generally these common use, daily use items are exempt. So generally you'll find that the items which are of importance, which are of maybe day-to-day use, maybe our basic necessities, they are the one which have found exemption when it comes to goods. This is what is the logic for goods, though there is no such defined rule anywhere. I'm just giving you a broad example of on what basis they have given exemption to goods. So it are generally the raw items. These are generally the unpacked, the non-branded items that have been exempted when it comes to goods. How will come to know this? You have to go to the goods rate schedule. In the goods rate schedule, wherever the rate given is nil, they are the ones which are exempt. Now for services, you don't find nil rate in services. Generally for services, the exemption is by way of a notification. So for goods, the exemption is by way of nil rating. For services, the exemption is by way of a notification. Now, there are two notifications that you have to study. First is notification number 12 bar 2017 of the central tax rate, same as for the state tax rate, where you will study exemption for intra-state supplies. And same items you'll find in notification number 9 bar 2017 of the integrated tax for integrated tax exemptions, and all are majorly same. So it is not necessary that you'll refer. Yes, there are few items which are exempt in integrated, but not in C and S. Reason is they are all import-export transactions where in that particular case for import and export, it will be exempt only when it is integrated, that is IGST. So those items or those transactions are finding place only in the integrated notification. Other than that, all other items are common between the CGST, SGST notification 12 and IGST notification number 9. I hope this basic background is clear to everyone. Everyone has understood this. Any questions, students, up to this point? Anybody has any doubts, questions on any of the aspects that we have discussed till now? Okay, Jyoti is clear, Hemant is clear, Jeannie. Okay, good. Now, let us study these exemption entries in detail, which are also very important from the point of view of your exams. Jyoti is asking if any goods exempt by virtue of notification, whether it can be retrospectively taxed. firstly answering your question in principle, the answer is if something is exempt, you cannot tax it, right? Now, the question of retrospectively being taxed depends upon whether the notification is issued now. If the notification is issued now, earlier it was taxed, now onwards it would be exempt. But let me just clarify you, as I said, this I'm answering only on in principle basis. For goods, as I already mentioned, the exemption is by way of nil rating, which you will find in the rate notification itself. So there is no exemption notification like what we are studying for services. Same exemption notification is not there for goods, because for goods, the exemption is by way of nil rating. I hope this is clear. Now, we go to different exemption entries. Now, the best part of our module is if you go to these exemption notifications, notification 12 or notification 9, the entries are in the sequence of the entry numbers. Like you have entry 1. Obviously, after this, in the notification, you'll have entry number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But here, our module has done the best thing that they have compiled and collated similar exemption entries together. Like here they have made the first group services relating to charitable and religious under one place. So that is why you'll find entry number 1, suddenly 13, 60, 80. But the best part is because in exams also your questions are more connected with one particular category. Like you will say that this is ABC Trust, which is doing this. So when it is doing this, you need to collate all these entries and then give an answer. So that is why this type of understanding where all similar things are put at one place is what is helpful from the exam point of view. So you need not refer anything else except this. Now, what is exempt in the first category? As the heading suggests, we are going to discuss exemption relating to charitable and religious activities. Now, let me make one thing very clear. There is a myth or a misunderstanding that charitable means free. I'm saying this is a myth. This is a misunderstanding. Why? Because if charitable meant free, there would have been no tax in the first place. Because if something is given free, it is not a supply, except for Schedule 1 items, which is very limited. Similarly, even under income tax, we have a specific section 11, 12, 13 of the Income Tax Act giving exemption for charitable activities. The point is, if charity is free, how can there be income? There would only be losses. What was the need of giving the exemptions under 11, 12, 13 of the Income Tax Act? So please first make this point clear, students, that if something is given free, whether by charitable organizations or to charitable organizations or to anybody, except the Schedule 1 items, it will anyways be outside GST levy. I will not require the exemption for that. So be clear with this. If you find in the sum that it is given that a person is a charitable entity, it is like a charitable trust, some NGO, some anath ashram, or some vruddhashram, or any of these which are generally charitable organizations. If they are giving something free, that is, they are not charging, they are doing it pro bono, there is no question of coming to exemption. You can straight away say no GST. Why? Because there is no supply, or there is supply, but there is no consideration. So if I give donation to trust, no GST. Why? Because there is only money, no supply coming. Other way around, the trust is using my money to do some activities free for poor children or for homeless children or for orphan children or for widows or for some ill people or for some poor people residing in some very remote places. If they are doing anything which is free, again, there is no question of GST. Why? Because there is no consideration coming. I will not need to come to this exemption. My answer in the exam question would be there is no GST. Why? Because it is free. Or because there is no supply, there is only donation. There is only money is flowing, but nothing is coming in return. Now, Here, what we are going to discuss is exemption, where the charitable organization has done something for which it has charged. And now comes the question of whether on this particular item, it has now become a supply because you have charged, whether there would be GST. For this, first is you come to the first entry of the notification also, that is entry 1. It says that services which are provided by any entity, and who should be this entity? It is the entity which is registered as per section 12AA or AB of the Income Tax Act. So, if you all have studied this section by chance, that is 11, 12, 13 of the income tax law, you will find that in income tax, there is a concept of public charitable trust. And who are those public charitable trusts? For that, the specific criteria is that they should be formed and registered as a trust under the respective state's trust act, and they should also get registered under the income tax as per section 12AA, 12AB with the Charity Commissioner of Income Tax. Now the point is that if you have registered yourself with the Charity Commissioner of Income Tax as per section 12AA or AB of the Income Tax Act, then only you are eligible for exemption under the GST law. So for coming to the GST exemption, you have to first check whether the entity has registered itself with the Charity Commissioner of Income Tax, whereby it is being treated as a charitable person or a charitable trust under the income tax law also. If the answer to this question is yes, then you proceed further to find that what are these activities which are considered as charitable. Again, I repeat, charitable does not mean free. So you are charging for it. Now, the most important point is here comes the distinction between income tax and GST. So first part is common. You have to be registered as a charitable trust as per 12AA of the Income Tax Act. This is common between income tax and GST. But the difference is under income tax, once you're registered under 12AA, virtually everything of yours can get covered in charitable. However, under the GST law, only specific items would be covered, which are covered in the definition of charitable activities, which we are going to see, or it is covered in one of these entries. It means the GST exemption to charitable trust is very specific and limited. The income tax exemption to charitable is very vast and it virtually covers majority of the activities. Now we come to first entry. The first entry says that you are registered under 12AA and whatever you are doing is charitable. Now, what is charitable has been defined in this notification itself, and it has defined charitable activities to mean these specific activities only. Only when you are doing one of these activities and for these activities you are charging, then you come here and you take exemption subject to these 2 points. One, you are registered under 12AA and your activities is falling in one of these items. Okay. Now let us do one thing. See, these are very plain, straightforward items. I give you 2 minutes. You all read this list so that I will ask some specific question. You have to answer me yes or no, that whether it falls in this list or not, right? Shall I give you 2 minutes? You all read this list. So students, if you have read this list, let me put some direct questions to you all. Now see, I presume that you would have understood what these entries are saying. Firstly, only these list items would be considered as charitable activities for the purpose of entry 1. Other than this, you may be doing anything, it will not be considered as charitable activity. Now, let us take some practical real life case scenarios to understand whether it fits over here. So let us say Baba Ramdev is organizing a yoga camp. Now, generally his yoga camps are free. But as I said, if you are taking example of free, there will be no question of exemption. So I'm presuming he's charging rupees 1,000 for the entry fees to that yoga camp. Will his 1,000 rupees be eligible for this exemption? Yes, students, tell me whether the 1,000 rupees that he is charging as entry fee for the yoga camp, whether it would be exempt.
It would be exempt, sir.
Reason?
It comes under advancement of religion, spirituality, or yoga.
Correct. And we are presuming that it is done under the name of Patanjali, which is a charitable trust registered under 12AA, right? Second question. If you all have watched this movie Sanju, where the role played of Sanjay Dutt, he is sent to some foreign place when he was a drug addict. Now let us say we also have similar places in India, which are called as Nasha Mukti Kendra, where people addicted to liquor, people addicted to different types of drugs or to tobacco and all these, they are enrolled over there and they are getting some type of, you can say, treatment, some type of counseling, some type of caretaking. Whether the amount which is, because nothing is free over there for that 1 month or 2 months when you are going to join that particular camp or that particular course, they will be charging you. It may be a heavy amount. So let us say 1 lakh rupees is the charge. Whether this 1 lakh which is charged would be exempt.
Yes, sir.
It would be exempt. Yes.
That is under the clause public health.
Yes. So under public health, under subpoint 3, again, here we have to check whether the entity which is doing this, whether it is a private organization or an organization which is registered as a trust, because you have private organizations also. It may not be a trust. So first you have to always check whether it is an organization which has registered itself under 12AA or AB, that is as a trust. Okay. Next is, again, I'll take another practical, one more example, that is of this 9/11 attack in US. If you all know, after that attack, it was the first major terrorist attack on the US soil. And the impact that it brought was that people over there for the first time were under fear, because till then they believed that the US security and everything is so sound that nobody can attack US. But it was such a thing that even those people who were not part of that particular terrorist attack, still they had gone into some type of psychological fear. And because of that, they were taking some counseling sessions so that they could come out of that. They were taking some therapy so that they could come out of that. In that particular case, whether the amount that they are paying would be eligible for exemption under this entry. Again, I'm assuming it is done by a person who is registered under 12AA. If you are saying yes, you have to tell me the entry.
So it is public health 3 and B.
Correct. It will mainly come over here. Traumatized persons. So persons who are traumatized. So see, so understand this. There are so many things, because that is why I'm taking practical examples, because otherwise these are very literal theoretical entries. We have to understand the practical implications of this. So as you can see the entries, care counseling of persons who are suffering with physical mental disability. So what will be covered over here? So basically here, mainly those charitable organizations are covered, which are taking care of people like who are blind, who are suffering from some very chronic diseases. Not diseases here disability is covered. So as I said, blind people are covered, or people with leprosy and all those type of, which is making them completely disabled. So for them, many charitable organizations, NGOs are working for their upliftment. That is covered. Then you'll find this person suffering with HIV/AIDS. You have organizations for them. Then persons addicted, we discuss this. Then those associations, organizations which are working for creating public awareness. Now, family planning, as we know, is a very important thing in India. So those organizations which are there for running some type of such programs or doing such activities which creates public awareness. One, about what? Preventive health, that is maintaining good health. So maintaining hygiene, having clean water, etc. Or about family planning, or about how AIDS can be prevented, the HIV infection can be prevented. Then advancement of spirituality, yoga. So all these centers like the Brahma Kumaris, like the Art of Living, like the Isha, all these foundations, all these organizations come in this particular entry, that is advancement of religion, spirituality, yoga. Similarly, advancement of educational programs or skill development programs relating to these type of persons. So you are running some programs for prisoners. So let us say there was a, I think, a movie or OTT series, I don't remember. It was Dasvi of Abhishek Bachchan, where I think he was chief minister or something, and then he was imprisoned, and then he completed his standard 10 from the prison. Now, in that case, that was slightly different because he had all the facilities, because he had been in a position. But from this particular example, what I'm trying to give you example of is that practically many times when children becomes they are put into prison, that is, they are put into that Bal Sudhar Graha for children, or where even adults who are above the age of 18, but they are still in the studying age, or they want to pursue some education. Then for them, there are special NGOs who are working for providing the educational training and programs within the prison for these people. Also for, as we know, abandoned and orphaned or homeless children. Again, there are many NGOs which are providing for their education and all. So for all this, again, what is important is generally what we see around us, they are the ones who are doing free for these children. If they are doing free, nobody's paying for it. There is no question of this exemption entry. It is required where somebody is paying for this. So these organizations are providing these services, and they are getting a consideration against that. That is what is coming in the exemption. And the last, preservation of environment, which includes watersheds, forests, wildlife. So if you remember, there was an NGO called as Save Tigers. Then we had Save Trees. So there are very varied NGOs which are working in this particular domain. So all these NGOs which are working on any of these specified categories are the one eligible for exemption. Now that was entry 1. Now we come to entry 13. Now what does entry 13 covers? It says service by a person by way of conduct of religious ceremonies. Now what this religious ceremony covers? It covers the Pandit ji, the priest who is coming to your house for conducting various types of pujas, yajnas, homas. So these people, when we pay them their remuneration, that remuneration is what is exempt under this entry. Now, who all are covered here? See, here it is not by any trust, it is by an individual person. That is that particular priest who's coming to your place. He's performing all the pujas and all. The priest is what is exempt. Now, in this relation, there is an important clarification. Yes. What is this clarification? It says that it can be inferred that the amount charged by whatever name called. So we normally call it as dakshina. So they say by whatever name call, you call it as remuneration, fee, dakshina, whatever. for conduct of religious ceremonies exempt. Now, what is important is this clarification. What is religious ceremony? These are the life cycle rituals. So what are life cycle rituals? Right from the birth of a child, we have different types of pujas and rituals that are performed. So life cycle rituals including special religious pujas conducted in terms of the religious text. This is very important. So the puja that you are doing is finding place in one of our religious texts in some of our Vedas, and it is done by a person so authorized by such religious texts. That is why I particularly said Panditji. So our religious text also specifies that by whom you should be getting this puja done. Now, interestingly, I don't know again whether you all have heard this, but in US now, they have come up with certain apps where if you want to do Satyanarayan Puja, now in US, I'm sure you all would be knowing this, that finding plumbers, carpenters, etc., all these people is very difficult. So similarly, finding a Panditji who will come all the way to your house and perform some puja is virtually impossible. But we have lot many Asians, Indians staying over there, and they all are strong followers of religion. So for them, in such countries like US, Canada, they have come up with apps where you open your TV screen or you open your tab and you subscribe for that puja. They charge you X amount, and then everything is done on the app itself. The app will give you instructions as to what you have to do. On the app, they show you the idol. They, in fact, if you do not have all these flowers and all, they will show that virtually flowers are being put on the idol and everything is done as if the actual puja is happening. Then mantras are played, the bhajans are played, arti is done. So everything is done by the app. Now, if you are doing something like this, that you have paid 1100 for getting some Satyanarayan puja done in your house and it is being done through an app, this exemption will not apply. Why? Because this exemption applies when the ritual is falling in religious ceremony. So what you are doing, let us say, is a religious ceremony. It is one of the pujas prescribed in one of our religious texts. That is fine. But the second requirement is it should be done by a person so authorized. App is not yet authorized by our religious text. So when app you are subscribing and you are paying some amount for getting some puja done, some home, some havan done, in that particular case, there will be no exemption. So this is the more important clarification which I was talking about. So the first part is conduct of religious ceremony, which is as per our religious text. Then comes the second part. Now this is interesting. What is this? When you visit any temple place, you will find that generally temples are having big premises, and either within those premises or adjacent to those premises, you have certain shops. Second, in many of these temple places, you have these places where you can stay overnight, especially because you are traveling to that particular Tirath Yatra. So you need a day or a two to stay. So these temples only, they have these places where you can stay and the charges are very nominal or reasonable. Again, what is important is it is not free. Now the question is the rent which is being charged by these trusts, which are again registered under 12AA. And right now, these are what? These are religious places. So here, the very important condition in this entry is it is not applicable to any charitable trust. It is applicable only if you are a religious body. That is, I particularly gave you example of mandir. So it can be mandir, dargah, church, etc., which are providing you residence. Now, in this particular case, the rent which they are charging is what is eligible for exemption if it is fitting within the limits prescribed. So firstly, what is covered? Renting of precincts of a religious place meant for general public, owned or managed by an entity which is registered as a charitable religious trust under 12AA of the Income Tax Act, or a trust institution registered under 1023C, etc., of the Income Tax Act. So you are registered under one of these provisions of the Income Tax Act, which makes you a religious trust or a religious body. Now, when you are giving your premises or your place on rent, it will be exempt if the charges do not exceed the limit given over here. Now, here actually it is saying nothing contained in entry B shall apply. So here what is They are saying for this it will be taxable. Now, if you want to understand what is exempt, it is the amount below this. So where you are giving rooms on rent, like we normally call it as dharmashalas. So you are going to a dharmashala which is generally run by a trust only, or it is always within the precincts premises of a mandir. So over there, this is very important. It should be within the premises of the mandir. If it is not within the premises of the mandir, if it is not part of any mandir, you will not get any exemption, because here the condition specifically it should be presence of a religious place. So here, if it is only a charitable trust but not registered as a religious place, then this exemption will not apply. The exemption is if the rent of the room per day is below 1,000. Even if it is 1,000, it will be taxable. So it has to be up to 999. Second, if they are giving any community halls or kalyana mandapam, or any open area. So here they give this generally for conducting marriage or any type of these ceremonies. So many of these mandirs have open lawns, or they have created a hall type of a thing which is called as community hall or Kalnana Mandapam, which they give on renting. Now generally these rentals are per day basis. So here the limit given is the rent should not exceed 10,000 in a day. So if it is 9,999, it will be exempt. If it is 10,000, it will be taxable. And where the religious place is giving shops. So many times you find within the religious place you have shops, or it is on the outer walls of the religious place that you have small shops for which the rent is being given to the temple itself. So over there where the rent does not exceed 10,000 per month. So first two limits are per day, because rooms or mandapams are taken on daily basis, but where it is shops, it is on monthly basis. So the rental limits are monthly, which is 10,000, below 10,000. So if it is below 10,000, it will be exempt. If it is 10,000 or more, it will be taxable. The next, not so important for exams, services by specified organization in respect of religious pilgrimage facilitated by Government of India under bilateral agreements. So you go for Hajj Yatra, you go for this Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, where there is a bilateral agreement. Why? Because it is falling in some other country's premises. Like for Kailash Mansarovar, you have a tie-up with China. For Hajj, you have a tie-up with Mecca, Medina. So all these places where you are going for a religious pilgrimage and it is facilitated by the Government of India, then the service charges which these organizations charge you for getting this entire pilgrimage done will be exempt. Now, this is interesting. Services by way of training or coaching. Now, this is not education. Education is a different entry. This is training or coaching. What type? Recreational activities relating to art, culture by an individual, or sports by charitable registered under 12AA or AB of the Income Tax Act. So, what are the examples of this? So, you go to get training of Kathak, which is a part of recreation also, and it is relating to arts. So, Kathak is relating to arts. So, when you go for Kathak training, it is what is falling over here. Or in many of our cities, we have the discussion which are run by trust registered over there. You are provided relating to sport. You have over there some camp going on. You have over the basketball court. You have the events and everything there, and you pay charges and avail those facilities. So those are what are exempt over here if it is by way of training or coaching in one of these activities. Again, there is some clarification which I believe we need to check because it is important. Yes. Now, what is the clarification? It is important to note that the exemption with regard to the service provided by way of training, coaching in recreational activities relating to art, culture is available when the same is provided by an individual. So here, if you see here, the requirement was individual. So what is clarified over here is many times these same recreational activities may be provided by some companies, some corporate bodies, that is other than individual, it will not be exempt. So you are going for some tabla classes. Again, it is an art form. If it is done by some teacher who is an individual, it is exempt. But if you are going to some academy which is training it, it will not be exempt. Similarly, services of training or coaching in sports are exempt only when these are done by whom? These are done by the trusts which are registered under 12A or AB. Now here, interestingly, the word is in the first part of the entry is recreational activities in the form of art culture. So what is recreation? The term recreation is very wide. However, the scope of this entry in recreation is restricted only to art and culture. Hence, training or coaching in recreational relating to the areas other than art or culture is outside the purview. Example, you go to a dance training, but that dance is teaching you a Bollywood dance. It will not be exempt. But if you go for a Garba dance class, which happens generally before Navratra, it will be exempt because Garba comes under art form, but Bollywood style or any hip hop or any of these dance forms do not come in the art or culture. So we have to understand this difference. And obviously, one more condition was it should be done by individual. I hope this is clear to everyone. So this whole entry, which we just covered, where 4 different entries are covered, are dealing with the exemptions which are relating to trust. Only there is one entry, rather 2 entries where it is relating to individual. One is this entry of recreation in art form or culture form, which is done by individual, and this entry where any type of religious ceremonies are performed. This is also done by individual. Other than this, whatever are the done activities, they have to be done by the entities which are registered as trust under 12AA or AB. I hope this entire category is clear to everyone. Great. Now we go to the second category. Just Mhm. Okay. Now we come to the second category. Now in this second category, as you can see the heading, agriculture related services. Now when we are talking about agriculture related services, please understand students, there is a difference between agricultural goods and agriculture related services. Here we are studying exclusively exemption relating to services. For goods, what is the rule? I'll tell you. As I already said, it is part of the rate schedule. In rate schedule also, what is given, I'll just give you a brief hint. As far as agriculture is concerned, the general rule rate schedule is agricultural goods are not pre-labeled, generally they are exempt. So if you are going to a grocery shop, you are buying rice, buying meat, or any of these agricultural items, where they are not pre-packed and pre-labeled. See, there is a difference between anything being branded, unbranded, anything being pre-packed and pre-labeled. Earlier, the exemption was on the basis of being branded or unbranded. So you are buying India Gate Basmati rice, or you are buying some Samrat's wheat. It is all branded. That was exempt only if you were, this is, I'm telling you, sometime back, before 2022, the exemption for agricultural goods was if it was unbranded. Now they changed that rule from 2022. Now they have shifted to whether it is pre-packed and pre-labeled, it will be taxed. So even if it is unbranded, but if it is pre-packed, now you'll ask, sir, what is the difference? The difference is you will find that something like these all departmental stores. For example, what are these branded chain stores? I'm forgetting the names. Big Bazaar. What they do, they buy things in bulk. Now they buy both types of items. One, they buy those items which are already branded. And second, they buy those items which are unbranded, like wheat and rice. And then they pre-pack it in 1 kg, 2 kg, 5 kgs pack, putting their own names. So you'll find in a big bazaar type of setup, or any these type of what we call them, these type of all chain stores you'll find in multiple places, where what they do is they buy things in bulk and they pack it in small packets of 1 kg, 2 kg, 5 kg with their own name. So that is what is, yeah, Star Bazaar and all these categories. So Big Bazaar, Star Bazaars. So different cities have different these types of stores, departmental stores, you can say. Now, what is the point? So we are discussing the services relating to agriculture, which are exempt, not the goods. But I've already given you a brief about, in general, where you will find the nil rating for goods. The nil rating for goods is where they are not pre-labeled and pre-packed. If they are pre-labeled, pre-packed, whether branded or not, it would be taxable. Fine. Now coming to services. Services, there are multiple entries. The major entry is entry 54. But before that, we'll cover all the small entries and then I'll come to 54. So what are the other entries? First, entry 24 is services. What type of services? Loading, unloading. That is handling of goods, packing, storage, warehousing. Now, any of these activities, if they are performed for this one product, that is rice. So where rice is transported, that is also exempt, that we'll see in the transportation entry. Here, transportation is not covered because there is a separate category for transportation, but just I'm informing for rice, transportation. So you are doing transport from one place to another, whatever transport charges you pay is exempt. You are storing the rice, warehousing the rice, the charges of storage, warehousing is exempt. So for rice, any of these services which you are availing as a businessman dealing in rice, everything is exempt. Similarly, you are dealing in minor forest produce. Now, you will ask, sir, what is minor forest produce? See, what is a forest produce? Now, today it is Pushpa, right? If you have seen Pushpa, maybe part one, part two has released today only. It will take time for at least me also to go and watch, and maybe for you also to go and watch. But we know one thing, that in Pushpa, they are dealing with forest produce. What is that? That is that Chandan wood. Now, Chandan wood is a forest produce, but it is a major forest produce because it is something which is huge in size. Similarly, where you are dealing in minor forest produce. So minor forest produce are those items from forest which are small in size. So it may be some leaves, it may be some type of small beans from some trees. So all these are, or fruits. So all these come under minor forest produce. So major is the wood, and minor is all the other items that you get from the forest. So where you are dealing with the warehousing of this, that is what is exempt. Next, storage, warehousing. Now here it is only storage and warehousing. Here it was loading, unloading, packing. So for rice, multiple activities are exempt, but for cereals, pulses, fruits and vegetables, only storage and warehousing is exempt. So as we see, fruits, vegetables, these are the most common items which require storage. One, considering the perishability. Two, because many times these are uh, grown and brought from the farm, but they are sold over a period of time. So in order to maintain them, like in our place, we have this potatoes, onions, which are stored even for six months. So how they can be stored for such a long period? Or we have grapes and so many oranges and so many things which are stored over a long period of time. So they are all stored using proper warehousing facilities. So where warehousing charges are paid for any of these items, it is also exempt. 54 will deal after covering these two. Then carrying out some intermediary production process as job work. So you are carrying out job work. Now job work is for what? in relation to cultivation of plants, rearing of life forms of animals, etc., etc. We are going to read this again in the definition of agricultural goods. So where you are performing any intermediate product process of agricultural trade, and last services by artificial insemination of livestock. Now, what is this? Reproduction of livestock. So when you get this artificial insemination, that is reproduction of your livestock. And why artificial? It is like test tube babies in case of human beings. So in similar fashion, we have the reproduction of artificial done for livestock also. So that is where these services will be eligible for exemption. Other than horses, even in income tax, you'll find that for treatment of income from maintaining and running horses, there is altogether different category. So except horses, for all other animals or livestock, artificial insemination, generally it is cows and buffaloes, because they are the one which are generally reproduced multiplicitly, because they can be sold also, or they are even milk giving. So that is why their artificial insemination is very common. Then the next item, which is the next what you can say livestock, is the goat and sheep. This is the second category where there is a lot of artificial insemination done to increase their stock. And the third, the biggest category, is hen, because even hen can be sold, and even they are giving eggs which can be sold. So artificial insemination is very common in these or poultry farms and all these industries. So where these services are available, they are also eligible for exemption. Now, after coming to all these services, let us go to the main entry, which is entry 54. Now, what does entry 54 says? If you are performing any of these services given in A, B, C, D, E, F, G relating to agricultural produce, then these services would be exempt. So your services should be one of these services which are covered in these entries A, B, C, D, E, F. So A, B, C, D, E, F are these services. But the most important point is these all services should be performed for the agricultural produce. Now the question is, what is agricultural produce? So we first understand the meaning of agricultural produce, because all these services which are given in section 54 list, they have to be performed for the agricultural produce, only then they are eligible for exemption. Now what is agricultural produce? It means produce. How you are getting this produce? By cultivation of plants. Now this is beauty. This is the best thing which I like whenever I study any taxation law. See, right from our childhood, when we were talking about farming and agriculture, it was always cultivation of land. So whenever you have talked about agriculture in your science or social sciences, always agriculture was described as cultivation of land. But see the beauty of taxation, the vision with which any tax entries are created or drafted. Here they have not said only cultivation of land. They are using a more bigger term, cultivation of plants. Because you have plants even in ponds and in rivers and water bodies. Now, if I say agriculture or agricultural produce is only encompassing cultivation of land, then those items like lotus, or there are so many items that are grown in ponds and in water bodies, they will not be fitting in this definition. That is why they have used a more bigger term, that is cultivation of plants. So what is covered in agricultural produce means any produce, how you are getting it first by way of cultivation of plants, or you are getting this produce by way of rearing of all life forms of animals. Now again, see the beauty of this. Even honeybees are covered here. Why? Because when they are referring to the word animal, they are covering the entire animal kingdom. Normally, see by animals, we mean dog, cat, lions, horses, etc. But here animals also includes insects and birds, because they are talking about the animal kingdom. So the second thing which is covered in agricultural produce is the produce that you get from the rearing of the animals, except obviously horses. And what type of produce you are getting? You are getting these produce in the form of food. So it covers the flesh, it covers the eggs, it covers the milk. Then you get fiber. So like by rearing sheep, you get the wool. So you get fiber. Then you get fuel, raw material, and other similar products. So like urine of cow or the cow dung, or many times many body parts of many of the animals are used as fuel or as some raw material, like the skin is used to make leather products. So there are so many items where these animals' body parts are used as some raw material or as some basic input material. Now, so two things are broadly covered in agricultural produce. One, which you get from cultivating plants, which may be on land or in water bodies. Two, by rearing animals, except horses. Now, what is very interesting is this part, which our module has also put in bold. So firstly, let us take a simple example of milk. Now, milk is fitting in this definition of agricultural produce. Now, first thing I would like to repeat and clarify. I am not talking about, I repeat, I am not talking about whether milk is exempt or not, because milk is goods. And for milk, you have to go to the goods rate entry, for which the requirement is that pre-packed, unbranded, unpacked, etc., etc. So I'm not talking about milk. But milk is covered in the definition of agricultural produce. So all these activities relating to milk will become exempt. So what is important over here is we are talking about the exemption of services relating to agricultural produce. Now, for the time being, we have concluded that milk is covered in the agricultural produce, but yet we have to check whether all milk is covered or only some specific milk is covered. That you'll get from this bold part. Like broadly, I can have two types of milk. One, which I get from the dairy near my house. So there is some dairy, there is some tabela, we normally call in Hindi, where you go in the morning, or that person comes throughout the day and he provides you the milk, right? So first that is there. Or the second is you go to some shop where you have different types of like brand or even now the question, these milks are agriculture. It's not talking about sick milk, milk, which is coming in the packets. No, out of both these, one is this all branded milk of Nandini brand or Amul brand or different brands, Mother Dairy and all these brands. Or the other one, which I am getting from my milkman or from the uh, tabela near my house. Whether both milks are agricultural produce, that you'll get the answer from this bold part. So what it says, on which either no further processing is done or such processing is done as usually done by the cultivator or producer, and most important, which does not alter its essential characteristics but makes it marketable for primary market. Now, when you read this bold part, you will get the answer to my practical question that whether both the sources of milk are agricultural produce. Answer is no. Only the milk that you are getting from the milkman, that is the tabela, the dairy near you, that is only fitting in this. The milk which you are getting from some Mother India brand or from Amul or Nandini or any of these brands, it cannot fit over here because it is processed. They have to process it so that the milk can be transported and can survive for 3 or 4 or 5 days, because the milk that you are getting is not the milk that they may have taken that day itself. It would be 2 days prior milk, because they would have taken it from their respective farms, or like in Gujarat, they collected the Amul, the unit of Amul collects it from all the farmers around. Then they process it, then they pack it, and this processing is done so that the milk can remain good till the time it is transported and it reaches your house, where it is changing hands between 3 or 4 people. So this is what is interesting, that this part which is bold is very important. Taking another example of wheat, we buy wheat in our house. Now, whether wheat is agricultural produce, again, I'm not talking about whether wheat is taxable or exempt. That depends upon the rate entry in the goods schedule. Here, I'm just checking whether wheat is agricultural produce so that all the above list of services will be exempt if wheat is agricultural produce. Now, when wheat is coming to your house, it is coming by way of some shop where you go and buy the wheat. Now, generally, when you see about wheat, there is no further processing done on the wheat. It is in the same form how the farmer sells it, except for slight cleaning and all. That is very basic process which does not alters. It is only necessary to make it marketable, and that also for primary market. But when we talk about rice, even if you are buying the open rice, that is which is not packed, which is not branded, even the open rice, if you are buying, it is not agricultural produce. Why? Because the rice which is produced by the farmers, which they supply, it is always the rice with the husk. Then the second step is the husk is removed. The third step is the rice which is coming out of the husk is slightly yellowish or brownish. So there is some milling done. And then that rice is ready for coming to your house. So the rice that we are buying, even though it is open rice, it is not a pre-packed or a branded or a pre-labeled packet. Even if you're buying in that goni where you say that, okay, I want 5 kgs and he weighs from that and gives you the 5 kgs, it will still not be agricultural produce. Why? Because there is some processing done. And most important, see, they have no problem with processing. What they are saying, the processing should be such as is done by the cultivator or grower. So in this case, by the farmer. Farmer does nothing. Farmer does not even remove the husk when it comes to rice. But when it comes to wheat, farmer removes the husk. See the difference. So for every product, the answer is different, whether it is agricultural produce or not. So this is what is very interesting. And obviously, for understanding this, we should have some farming background, or we should get the first-hand knowledge by going to the market and understanding how it is being bought and sold in primary market. Now, what does the entry says? Services relating to. Now, what is exam? Services relating to cultivation of plants, rearing of live forms of animals, except horses for food, fiber, raw, etc. These are first single options. So where you are getting the agriculture, any part of this you are getting the charges, it will be exempt because it is relating to agricultural produce and it is agricultural operations, any one of this. Second, it is supply of farm labor. So where you contact some agency, some manpower agency, you tell them that, okay, I require 100 people to work on my farm. And the agency says, okay, I'll provide you 100 people, I'll charge you this much amount. So when you're paying that amount to that manpower supply agency, when that manpower agency is supplying the work, the labor for other all types of activities like construction or manufacturing or anything, it is taxable. When it is supplying this labor for farm work, the same labor and the amount paid to the manpower agency would be exempt. Then for processes carried out at an agriculture farm. Now on the farm itself, there are very small and big type of processes that have to be done. They have given names of them: tending, burning, cutting, harvesting, drying, so many things. So when these activities, if the farmer is hiring someone and paying the higher charges, it will be exempt. Next, renting, leasing of agro machinery or the land itself. So let us say you need tractors. You are not buying the tractors, you are hiring the tractors. That is what is renting or leasing some agro machinery. Or you are taking the vacant land, that is the agriculture land itself, on rent. The rent charges would be exempt. Then loading, unloading, packing, storage or warehousing of any of the agricultural produce till they are in the agricultural produce stage, that is without any processing. Then agriculture extension services, that is relating to some research in agriculture, relating to different types of soil testing, water testing, etc., etc. All these are agriculture extension. And most important, services of these commission agents. Now, in practical market, the commission agents who are in the business or activity of doing agency for agricultural produce, they are called as adhatyas. So these adhatyas who are doing or who are the middlemen between the farmer and the businessmen who buy these goods and sell these goods on behalf of the farmers, and they charge their commission, which is called as adhat. That commission is exempt. And similarly, in different cities, you have these APMCs. We call it as the APMC market. It is the place where all farmers bring their produce, and over there, the produce is being auctioned. And the people come and they take the produce by putting some auction stake. So it is the place, that place is called as APMC, that is Agriculture Produce Marketing Committee. They also charge some fees if you want to come there and buy or sell the goods. So these are the services which are exempt relating to agricultural produce. I hope students, this entire agriculture related entry is clear. Anybody has any questions on this agriculture related entry? What is beta your question? I did not get. At MSP means what? MSP is minimum selling price. But what is this at MSP? I did not get your question. Mansha, but I did not get your question when you are asking at MSP question mark. Means what? On tractor for use in agriculture activity, it should be exempt because it is renting of agro machinery. Tender fee given to APMC exempt by virtue of this entry, yes. Agriculture Produce Marketing Committee sell at MSP. See, when you are selling at MSP, but what are you selling? You are selling the agricultural produce. Now, as I said, this entry is not for agricultural products. For that, you have to go to the rate schedule, where I said that the general rule for agricultural items is till the time they are in the pre-pack condition, they are exempt. This is the general rule. So answering your question, firstly, it is yes, it will be exempt where APMCs are selling it at MSP, but it is not exempt because of this entry, because this entry does not cover exemption for goods. Manish, I hope you got the answer for your question also, right? So I've answered everybody's question. Mansha, I hope you are also clear with your doubt. Perfect. So now we'll take a break of 15 minutes. Then we'll go to the next category, which is education related services. So now it is 7:45. We resume at 8 o'clock. Fine. So let us have a 15 minutes break. Thank you. So I'll first take up the question which I had at the start of the session, I think by Shreya. So Shreya, as far as I recall, it is exempt. What you are saying is correct. Let me just check if I can immediately find the reference. But yes, I do recall that it is exempt. As I said, I have not yet gone through that question. There may be some typo error, maybe, but what you are saying is I also concur to that, Shreya. Fine, beta? Mm, yes, it is visible, but it is very small. No worries, Shreya. But that's why I'm saying I understood your question. So my answer is yes, I concur to what you are saying. So I'll just check that the question also, and then maybe we can again reconnect on that. Fine, beta?
Okay, sir, thank you.
Yes, but what you are saying is in principle correct.
So that
Fine.
second part is the only issue, right? Because if we add the IGST amount, then it's wrong because for SEZ, all imports are exempt. So I had the doubt because it is like an old question, so I was confused. Means it was almost 2 years ago. So is
Hmm.
there any amendment that was not applicable then that has become applicable now or something like that?
That I also better need to check because there are so many amendments and see, this is not a GST point, this is a customs point, right? So we
Yes.
have to even check the customs notification, and most important, we have to also go through the SEZ law. But anyways, in principle, that's why I'm saying the general rule is that there is exemption for IGST. So if it is by SEZ, but let's see, I'll also just go through that question so that I will also get a clarity whether if it is dealing with some earlier period, maybe I can go back to that period and check if there was some taxability in that period. That's why I said in principle, but what you are saying, I agree to that.
Okay, sir. It is a May 23 exam question. Question number 4, sub question C.
Okay, May 23 exam. Fine, na?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect, beta. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, now we go to the next category of exemption, the third category for today. First was relating to charitable and religious. Second was agriculture. Now, third is education. Now, this, students, I will say it is supplier specific service. What do I mean by supplier specific? Here, it is very important who is the supplier in first two parts, double A and A. So what it says here, they are simply saying services. They are not saying educational services. So please note this point in some entries, like when we'll go to healthcare, they will say healthcare services. So over there, the nature of service is also important. Here, the nature of service is not specified. They are simply saying services. So it can be any services, which is now here the exemption is supplier specific. How? It says by an educational institution, and then it says to its students, faculty, and staff. So it is supplier plus recipient specific, but they have not specified the nature of service. Now, what it includes, let us understand this practically. So let us say I'm an education institution. Now, who is education? We'll discuss in the definition below. Now, let us say if I'm education institution and you have joined my education institution, then whatever I'm charging you, whether it is the fees for the schooling or whether it is fees for the hostel boarding, it is fees for transport, it is fees for food, it is fees for any extracurricular, whatever it is, form fee, it is exam fee, it is some library fee, it is some I-card fee, anything, any amount which I am charging to you and you are my student, it is what is exempt. Similarly, where I'm providing any service to my faculty or staff. So generally, these are boarding schools, their faculties also, they stay in those places. Especially you have these schools in Mussoorie, Dehradun, which is a hill station. So over there, even the faculties come and stay there. And the school charges them some amount for the lodging, boarding facility, the food, all facilities. Similarly, in our area where the faculties travel using the school cab or the school bus, the staff travels using the school bus, or they take the food in the school charges them for all these things. All this will be exempt. So here, even service of food and service of transport will be exempt because this entry is not service specific. It is not dependent on what the service is. It is dependent on who is giving to whom. So the condition is it should be given by educational institution to its students, faculty, and staff. See, just for your curiosity of understanding the law purpose, this one word is also very important. To its students, because today you are also a student, but you may not be student of my institute because you have taken admission in college X, I am college Y. So until and unless you are my student, if you come and avail any services in my college, it will not be exempt. So this one word is also interesting and important to create the difference. Now, basis this, there was a dispute. What was the dispute? This is where I highlighted this word. The dispute answer is in double A. So the dispute is, I'm a college which is running entrance exam. Now, many of these MBA colleges or even these designing institutes, they have their own entrance exams where you pay some fees, some 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, and then the particular college conducts their own entrance exams. Now, this particular entrance exam fee was under a scanner of the GST authorities. They said that you are not eligible for exemption. Why? Because on the date when you are taking the exam, you may be a student, but you are not student of that college, at least on that day. You will appear for the exam, you will be passing or failing, you may be selected, you may not be selected. So you are not confirmed to be the student of that particular institute, at least on the day when you are giving the exams. So that is why you are not fitting in A. Now, this was a very big challenge. So the lawmaker brought an amendment to overcome this particular problem, which is double A. What it says, by an educational institution, by way of conduct of entrance examination against consideration in the form of entrance fees. Here they have removed the condition of being a student. So once an educational institution is conducting an entrance exam, the fee that they are charging for this entrance exam, that is exempt. Obviously, it is not for their students because you are yet to become the student of that particular institute, right? Now, who is an educational institute? That is important. For this purpose, we have to go to the definition given in this notification for educational institution. Now, educational institution covers these three people. So if you are any one of them, you will be termed as an educational institution, right? Now, who are they? First, you are a preschool education or education up to higher secondary or equivalent. So now firstly understand each word. Preschool. What is preschool? Preschool is all types of these, what do you call them as? I'm forgetting the word. Uh, all these small kids are put na before they actual start their classes, their
Nursery, kindergarten?
kindergarten. Yes.
Yes, sir.
So see, now it has also become a fad in many cities, and people are putting their kids who are barely able to walk and sit and uh, do anything, but they put their kids right at a very tender age of 1.5 year, 2 years, and they make their kids go there for 2, 3 hours and do some activity. Kindergarten. So you're right, which is also called as preschool. So that is also covered here, plus your schooling up to standard 12, which is called as higher secondary. So anything up to standard 12 is educational institution, one. Second, education which is part of curriculum for obtaining a qualification recognized by law. Now this part is important for the time being in force. Now this covers everything beyond standard 12 up to graduation, post-graduation, all types of masters, everything. Now, in fact, you can say this is where even our institute is covered. Now, point is very important. So what it is saying, education as a part of curriculum for obtaining qualification recognized by law, and they are further saying for the timing in force. In fact, I should say underline from here. Now, what is interesting, the difference between 1 and 2. Now, today we have some foreign boards also which are operating in India, especially in the schooling sector. You will see this IGHC board something, which is this UK curriculum. So you have the IGSC board, which is the UK pattern. Now that up to standard 12, that board is exempt. So the school having that IGCHE board is exempt because for point number 1, the only requirement is it should be up to higher secondary. They have nowhere used the word recognized by law. However, when you come to point 2 and when you go beyond standard 12 for graduation, post-graduation and all these master qualifications, then the requirement is it should be recognized by law. And when they are saying recognized by law, it is implied that the law which is applicable in India. Now, these foreign boards, which have now in past few years set up their schools and even up to colleges in India, they are not as per the qualification or curriculum recognized in India by laws of India. Important. So these boards curriculum up to 12th are exempt because for point 1, there is no condition that it has to be recognized by law in India. But beyond point 1, this condition is not there. So beyond point 1, that is in point 2, after standard 12, if you are taking education in any foreign board, even though that particular college or institution is in India, but if it is a foreign board, it will not be exempt. Keep this in mind. And then the third is education as a part of approved vocational education course. Now, what is vocational education? Firstly, vocational is where you are learning skills. So generally in schools and colleges, what we are doing is we are taking academic education. Vocational is where you are doing some type of plumbing, you become electrician, you learn how to use different types of machines which are used in industry. So such courses are what are vocational training courses. Now, yes, ITI is correct. Industrial training institutes are covered, right? Now see here, this is the point which I was talking about. So it has to be a curriculum which is applicable or which is recognized by Indian law. So that is why foreign boards are not covered. Now they have just tried to give you in a tabular form what will be covered, what will not be covered. Conduct of degree courses by college, universities or institution. These courses lead to grant of qualification, so covered. Private classes not covered because such training does not lead to grant of qualification. Education as a part of curriculum for obtaining qualification recognized by law of a foreign company, that is a foreign board, that is also not covered. Only a course which is recognized by any Indian law is covered, right? Now, so the first part, A and double A, are dealing with these services provided by schools, colleges, or vocational training institutes like ITI. But in part B, what is interesting is the inward services are exempt. So in part A and AA, the outward services given by schools, colleges is exempt, where schools, college is the supplier. In part B, school, college is the recipient. So part B says where services are provided to an educational institution. In first part, it was by an educational institution. So school, colleges were supplier in part A and AA. In part B, school and colleges are the recipient. Now, what are the services which would be exempt, which is taken as inward service by the school, colleges? First is transportation. So when the school is providing transportation facility to students and charging to their staff and students, it is exempt for the school here. But when it is taking the same service inward, what do you mean by inward? The school does not have its own buses. So it has hired some transporter, some agency, and asked them to provide them buses on different routes. That is the service which the school, college is taking as an inward service. That will be exempt in point B, clause 1. However, there is some condition given below. We'll come to that condition. Second inward service is the service of catering or of midday meal scheme, which is sponsored by government. So midday meals sponsored by government, that is different. Or you are having your own catering. Now again, nowadays, schools are providing your meals, one-time meals the schools are providing, for which they are charging. This particular meals is what is covered in B2, where some canteen or some type of food contractor is providing these food services to the school for obviously the students and staff, and the school becomes a recipient. So school is paying the charges to this canteen operator. That will be covered in the exemption. Third is where the school has taken services of any security agency for getting security guards. So generally in schools, you'll find that for the purpose of safety or of the students, they generally have these security guards, and there are multiple security guards appointed by the school, and generally school do not hire them. They hire the services of a agency which is called a security agency, and the security agency provides them the security guard. So security services, cleaning, housekeeping services. So all these maids and the now in every classroom along with teacher, they have two or three staff who are there for cleaning, etc. Because especially if it is a smaller grade class of first, second, third, fourth standard. So all those services, again, they hire some agency which will be providing these cleaning staff or housekeeping staff. Again, the payment made to these agencies would be eligible for exemption. Then the services relating to admission, conduct of exams by such institutions. Again, whenever the institution has to conduct the exams, many times it hires the teachers who would be setting the papers. So again, the school is getting the service by these teachers. So the payment made by the school to these teachers, you may call them as teachers or professionals who are doing the paper setting, checking, etc. Even the supervision services, they all would be falling in this exemption. And then lastly, it is the supply of online educational journals or periodicals. Now, for all these 5 services, school is the recipient. But these 5 services are not always exempt. So there is some qualification which is given over here, but from here it is slightly difficult to understand. So I'll go to that table, which is very beautifully given in our module, which explains when these inward services would be exempt. So we have this beautiful table given. So all these inward services of food, etc. is exempt. But it is not exempt always. Now see, this is the table which you should refer. So total there are 5 inward services which are eligible for exemptions. And we have 3 types of educational institution. One is up to standard 12. Then the second is all types of degree. And third is the vocational. Now for all these 3, out of these 5 inward services, what are exempt? So first is when you are up to higher secondary, that is your school is either preschool or up to standard 12. What all inward services are exempt? First, service of transportation. Second, service of catering. Third, service of security. And fourth, service of relating to examination or admission. So out of 5, 4 services taken by the preschool or up to higher secondary school is exempt. In other words, if the school is taking the 5th service, that is online periodicals, it will not be exempt. Now you can keep the logic like this, that anyway schools will not require online periodicals because their kids are very small. They are not used to referring to online journals and periodicals. So if the school is taking any of these services, it will not be eligible for the exemption. Second category is where you are talking about colleges, all the degree colleges, the graduation, post-graduation, master courses colleges. Now for them, the first 2-3 services are not exempt, like transportation of students, catering, etc. This is not exempt. What is exempt for them is directly services relating to admission, conduct of exams, and supply of online journals, periodicals. Again, you'll ask why? Any logic? Yes. Because generally, since these are all grown-up kids, the college never maintains the facility of transportation. I am not saying they never, but it is very rare that the colleges have their buses and all. And also catering, you will find rarely that any colleges provide any in-house catering. They may have a separate canteen, which is a separate agency, but generally they do not get into this particular catering. Also, they do not require this cleaning or housekeeping. Means they require, but that is not required for the students as such. So generally, when the kids are grown up, these three services are generally not required by that particular college, and hence, even if the college is availing those services, there is no exemption. Now, what are the main services which these colleges require to run their college effectively? It is the service relating to conduct of exams and admission, and it is the online journals and periodicals. And now, since your kids are grown up, definitely they would be referring to journals. So those services are required by the college for running their college effectively, and that is what is put in exemption. And when it comes to vocational, it is only services relating to conduct of exams, because no other services are actually required by vocational institutions for running their vocational training courses. But the only service that they need is mainly the services relating to admissions and conduct of exams. So that is only what is given exemption. If they are availing any of the other services like catering, transport for their students, that would be fully exempt. So when these three categories of educational institutions are availing inward services, out of 5, first school is getting benefit of 4, colleges and degree colleges are getting benefit of 2, and vocational is getting benefit of only 1. And you can see what is put in which column is very logical. Those services which are required by them compulsorily for smooth and effective functioning of their work, only that is what is put in the exemption category. Other than that, what is not compulsorily required by them, which is not necessary for the effective working of that particular school, college, etc., that is not put in the exemption. So even if you avail that, it will be taxable. I hope students have got all these entries relating to the school, colleges, that is the educational category. Anybody having any doubts on this? Yes, students, anybody, any doubts on this? Mansha is saying one more output service, research service by education institution is exempt. But under which entry you are saying this is exempt? Yes, Mansha, under which category you are saying it is exempt? Okay. Coming to the fourth category, healthcare services. Now, healthcare, generally what we call as hospitals, is again having a very important exemption. Mithali, NEET coaching, see, we have already seen where coaching is given by any private institutes or classes, it is never exempt, because coaching is different from education. So NEET coaching provided by any of the classes, they are all private coaching classes. There is no exemption to private coaching classes. Fine. Yes. Now we go to the healthcare category. Now in healthcare, the category that is entry 74 is the one which is dealing with us. And other than that, there are some small services which are also exempt. Firstly, let us cover those. So first is entry 46, which is the services by veterinary clinics. We know what is veterinary. It is relating to pets. So where it is relating to health of animals or birds, such clinics, such hospitals are called as veterinary clinics or hospitals. Their services are exempt. Now we come to our service, which is entry 74. Now in this, there are two A and B. B is simple, service provided by way of transportation of patients in ambulance. So where the uh, patient has to be transported from one place to another and you hire some ambulance. If the ambulance belongs to hospital, still it is exempt in part A. If it is from outside, it is still exempt in part B. So in any of the entries, it will be covered either part A or part B. Now, what is part A? Now, part A says healthcare services. Now, here it is different from the education entry. In education, there was no word like education services. It was only services provided by. Here, they have specified that the service should also be this and it should be provided by this. So, here it is both. Here, the exemption is service specific as well as supplier specific. So, both things have to coexist. If one of the things is absent, exemption is not allowed. So, first, your service should fall in the definition of healthcare, and the provider should be one of this. That is clinical establishment like hospitals, or authorized medical practitioners like doctors, or paramedics like nutritionists or physiotherapists, etc. So let us go to these definitions in detail. First important definition is of healthcare service. So what is exempt over here is only where the service satisfies the definition and conditions given here in the term health care. Now, what is healthcare? It means three types of services. It may be only diagnosis, it may be treatment, or it may be. So where you go for blood testing, you do the saline, that is only because only diagnosis is also healthcare. Or you go to some doctor for some consulting, or you go to some hospital for some treatment, that is also covered. Third, where either in the hospital after the surgery or either in some wellness center, you go for recovery. That is the care part. That is also exempt. So three types of activities are falling in healthcare. One is diagnosis, one is treatment, one is the post-treatment care. Any of this would be exempt. So Mansha, you are right. So it is a specific research and development services by research institutions. Now, when you are saying educational institutions, it is not this educational institution, it is the educational institutions relating to research. Still, if you have that entry, you can just put me the image, I'll explain what it is. But it is not these educational institutions, right? Now, pay attention. So we are discussing this, what is covered in healthcare: diagnosis, treatment, care. So these three things independently are healthcare, but they should be relating to what? So you are doing diagnosis, treatment, care of what? For either illness or injury or deformity or abnormality or pregnancy. So where the diagnosis, treatment, care is relating to any one of these, it would fall in healthcare. So firstly, what activity you are doing, it is either diagnosis or treatment or care. Secondly, it should be for illness. Now we all understand illness is what. So we say you fall ill, it means you are not feeling well. So that is illness. Second is injury. Now injury happens at the time of some accident or some any such act where you get hurt. That is what is injury. Then there is deformity, abnormality. These two things generally happen at the time of birth itself. Either there is some undergrowth or there is some excess growth. That is deformity or abnormality. And then fifth category is pregnancy. So when you are going for a diagnosis, treatment, care for any one of these, then only it will fall in healthcare. And the last requirement is it should be done only by way of any recognized systems of medicine. Now, what is the recognized system of medicines? We call it as Ayush, where N is silent. So in fact, the government is also running this Ayush scheme. So Ayush is what? Double AYUSH. First A is allopathy. Second A is Ayurveda. Double A, Y is yoga. U is Unani. S is Siddha. H is homeopathy. Now this N, naturopathy, is silent in the spelling of Ayush. So we spell it as double AYUSH. You can add N over there, but in the when you are spelling it, it is silent. Now these are the recognized systems of medicine. Now, besides this, what is not covered? I don't know whether you all have heard of this or not, but there is Reiki, there is sound therapy, there is color therapy, Then there is some one more Chinese therapy, I forgot the name. So these are also different forms which are used for treating people. There is one something called as what? Pranic healing. So these are also different forms of treatment, but they are not recognized. So if you are treating someone from one of these forms, as I said, Reiki or pranic healing or the sound therapy or the color therapy, that is not eligible for exemption because it is not one of the recognized systems of medicines. So firstly, what you are doing is diagnosis, treatment, or care, any one of this or combination of this. Then it is done for what? For any type of illness, that is disease. Second is injury or deformity, abnormality, or pregnancy. And thirdly, it should be done in relation to only recognized systems of medicines, right? And what are recognized? It is Ayush with N silent. Now, second thing what is covered is transportation of patient to and from the clinical establishment. So where the hospital itself is providing the ambulance service, that is covered. Okay. Now what is very important is this part. It says, however, what is not covered in healthcare is hair transplant or cosmetic or plastic surgery. Now these are also some type of treatment only, but this three will not be covered in healthcare if they are done for beautification. So if there is baldness and you go for hair treatment, it is not covered. If you are going for beautification whereby you are getting some cosmetic surgery done, or by way of some plastic surgery, you are improving the shape of your nose or your eyes or your ears or your lips, as many of these film stars do, that is what is plastic surgery, again not eligible for exemption. So where any of these three things are done only for beautification, they are not exempt. But where they are done as a part of your treatment, which is compulsion, it will be exempt. So what it says does not include these three. So firstly, your healthcare is not including these three. So for the time being, up to this point, it means it is taxable. But it has put again exempt. So it will be exempt, but when it will be exempt? When it is undertaken to restore, reconstruct anatomy or functions of the body. So where any of these three things are done, why? To restore or reconstruct the functions of the body or the anatomy. And why it was required? Affected due to congenital defects, developmental abnormality, injury, or trauma. So as I said, where these three things are done for beautification, it will be taxable. But where these three things are done as a part of your treatment, it was a necessity. So let us say somebody is undergoing some treatment which leads to hair fall. So that in that case, getting hair transplant would be covered. If there was some fire accident with you because of which the skin got damaged, so you are getting some cosmetic surgery done. Or there was some accident in which you damage your nose, you damage some part of your face, you get the plastic surgery done. In that case, it will be exempt. But where it is done purely for beautification purposes, it will be taxable. No, Mansha Beda, whether you are admitted or not, see, for plastic surgery, anyways, you have to get admitted, right, Mansha? But the point is, if you are getting admitted for plastic surgery, but the plastic surgery is only for beautification, you did not have any accident or there was no any developmental, that is by birth, there was no deformity or abnormality. Only for beautification, if you are getting this done, maybe you may be admitted to the hospital, because for plastic surgery operations, you have to get admitted because it is undergoing the proper operation where you are also given the general anesthesia. So it requires admission and it may require 3-4 days or even at times a longer period, depending upon to what extent that part of your body is damaged. So if it is only for beautification, it will not be exempt whether you are admitted or not. Right, beta? So this is the definition of healthcare services. So first part of this definition requires what? The first part of this definition requires that it should be either by way of diagnosis, treatment, or care. Then it should be for illness, injury, deformity, abnormality. And then third part, it should be only in recognized systems of medicines. When all these three are present, then only it will be healthcare. And then it has carved out three different cases, that is hair transplant, cosmetic, plastic surgery, where it clarifies that if this is done as a compulsion for treatment of congenital defects, developmental abnormality, injury, etc., it will still be exempt. Otherwise, it will become taxable. I hope this is clear to everyone. Then comes the definition of clinical establishments, the three definitions, the definition of the three suppliers. Now, when this healthcare will be exempt, let us say I gain a lot of knowledge through reading books, through various YouTube videos, and now I am also giving you some treatment in homeopathy or Ayurveda or Unani. So now see, since lockdown, this has become a trend that people are taking some training, some online courses or reading a lot of material, listening to various YouTube channels and videos, and they are getting very good hands-on experience, not experience, but at least knowledge, and they are using it in their day-to-day life. That is very good. But will your treatment done by you exempt? Answer is no, because this service exemption entry requires two things. One is the nature of service, which we just discussed, and second is the supplier. Now, who should be the supplier? Then this exemption entry applies. You should be one of the three: clinical establishment, medical practitioner, or paramedics. Who are these? Clinical establishment means a hospital, nursing home, clinic. So these are the places where you go for treatment. Or it is a sanatorium. This is the place where you go for care, that is post-recovery, or any other institution by whatever name called that offers the facility of diagnosis, treatment, care, illness, injury, etc., etc., etc. So any of these organizations like hospitals, etc., are covered. Similarly, where you go for diagnosis, you go to some diagnostic center. So now you have various types of diagnostic centers like Metropolis, like your some Apollo. So these are pure diagnostic centers who are only doing testing of blood, urine, etc. So when you go there for taking various types of reports, that is also exempt. Second, who should be your supplier? The supplier should be authorized medical practitioner. In simple words, it means doctor. So what does the definition says? It means medical practitioner registered with any of the councils of the recognized systems of medicine. What is this council like? How for we chartered accountants, we say it is our institute, that is ICAI. For company secretary, it is ICSI. Similarly, for the medical field, their institutes are councils. Like for allopathy, it is IMA, Indian Medical Association, right? So for all types of these recognized systems, like for Ayurveda, like for your Unani, or for Siddha, there are different councils or boards which are their regulatory bodies, like how we have our institute ICEI. So you should be registered with them as a practitioner. So same applies to us also. So tomorrow when you will qualify, you will become a member of our institute. But if you want to practice, you have to take a COP. Then you become a registered practitioner with the institute, and only then you are eligible to practice. So service provider should be either hospital. Second, it should be a doctor. How is doctor defined? It means a medical practitioner registered with any of the councils of recognized system of medicines established or recognized by law in India. Again, this is very important. So this council should be IMA. It should not be any council of US, UK where you are taking registration. In that case, you are not covered. So if these doctors have to do any type of treatment in India, their service fees will not be exempt until and unless they take some registration from the Indian councils also. It also includes some medical professional having requisite qualification to practice in recognized systems of medicine in India as per the law for the time being in force. So this part applies to the foreign doctors and all. So when somebody has taken their entire education in US, UK, like even our Indian doctors go there and they take the education. When they come back here, they have to comply with some basic formalities. Once they do that, even they are allowed to practice in India as per the Indian laws. That is also covered over here. So either you have done entire thing from Indian councils, or even if you have done from outside councils, but you comply with the other requirements, which makes you eligible to practice in India as per the laws of India, then you are called as a authorized medical practitioner, in simple words, doctor. Then comes the last part, that is paramedics. Now, it is not defined in the notification. First two things are defined, it is not defined, but you can see the definition from the general dictionary also. Paramedics are trained healthcare professional. Now, this is important. So they may not be having any specific qualification. There may not be any degree or course for becoming a paramedic, but they take training and for which they get a certificate. So they are trained healthcare professionals, for example, nursing staff, physiotherapists, technicians, lab assistants, etc. Services by them in clinical establishment would be in the capacity of employee anyways, out of question. But where they are providing these services in their independent capacity, like we go to a nutritionist, we go to a physiotherapist, they are working in their independent capacity, that will also be exempt. So coming back to the entry, what is exempt? Healthcare service. We discussed that, or we understood the entire definition in detail, and it should be by a clinical establishment or an authorized medical practitioner or paramedics. Then only this will be exempt. Right? Now, there was an amendment in this entry 2 years back, whereby they have now made one part of the hospital bill taxable. Prior to this bold part, entire hospital bill. Acha, now this is interesting. When you are admitted in a hospital, you avail multiple things in the hospital as a part of composite supply of the healthcare service, where one is the treatment, but the other is the room charges, which is as good as renting of room, because they charge you the room charges separately, which is the renting of that particular room. Second is you also get food. You get so many other services within the hospital besides this healthcare. But those services also become exempt because of the concept of composite supply. So when you are an inpatient means you are admitted in the hospital, the services that you are getting in the hospital is exempt. So when you are admitted in a hospital, we call it as inpatient. And when you are just going for checking a regular follow-up, you are called as outpatient. So you have the OPD, outpatient department, where people who are not admitted, but they have come for some follow-up or for some checkup. Now see the difference. When you are admitted in the hospital, your hospital bill covers the treatment charges, the doctor visit charges, the nursing staff charges, the room charges, the food charges, even the medicines. Everything becomes exempt. Everything will be exempt because of the concept of composite supply, where all these things are provided as one bunch. And out of all this, medical, that is healthcare, is the main principal supply. Because of this, everything in your hospital bill is exempt. But if you are an outpatient and you come to the hospital and you are getting the treatment facility, that will be exempt because it is still healthcare. But then if you buy medicines at the time of after checkup, the doctor gives you a prescription. So you go and buy medicines. Those medicines will not be exempt because then they do not form part of composite supply, because now you are not an inpatient. So understand the difference. Where you are admitted in the hospital, then your entire hospital bill, including food, including medicine, everything will be exempt because of composite supply. But when you are an outpatient, then only the visit charges or your treatment charges by the doctor or the checkup charges by the doctor will only be exempt, and the other charges like the medicines you buy or any other thing, any other facility you avail will not be exempt. I hope this point is clear to everyone. Now, what was the amendment which we are going to now see? So when a particular person is admitted, I just mentioned that everything in the hospital bill becomes exempt because of the concept of composite supply. Now here it was observed and it came to the notice, or it was brought to the notice of the council, that there are many hospitals where they have rooms like hotels, and hotels means five-star hotels. They have suite rooms also. especially for all these celebrities and the cricketers and all these big shot people, that when anybody from their family is admitted, they are given treatment not like a hospital, but like a 5-star, 7-star hotels. And then the room charges are also per day in thousands or even in lakhs, depending upon the category of room you are taking. In such a case, the question was, why should we give them exemption? Yes, because of composite supply, they are getting eligible for exemption. But why should we give them exemption? That is why this particular entry was introduced, which said that if your per day room charges is exceeding 5,000, then all other services that you are getting as inpatient will remain exempt because of the concept of composite supply. But this one service will be removed and it will now be taxed. So 5,000 per day, if your room charges is exceeding this amount, then we will tax this amount independently and the remaining hospital bill will be exempt. However, again, there is an exception to this. What is the exception? It says other than ICU or CCU or ICCU or NICU. So if you are admitted in any of these 4 categories, then even though the per day charges exceeding 5,000 will still be exempt. But other than these 4 categories, if your per day room charges exceeds 5,000, it will be taxable. It will not be considered as part of health care services. I hope this is clear to all. This is all about the health care entry. Anybody having any doubts, students, in the healthcare entry? Now, there is some clarification. Services other than healthcare in the clinical establishment. What will be the treatment of this? Yes, Mansha, hospitals will need registration if they are providing any services or any supply which is taxable, even though if it is of a very nominal value. But where the hospital is doing something which is fully exempt, then it need not take registration. Now, supply of service other than healthcare, such as renting of shops. Now, this is the point. So within the hospital, you have the medical shop, which the hospital is not running. It has given somebody else on rent. The hospital has one floor canteen where the hospital is not running the canteen. It is given to somebody else to run where the hospital is charging some rent. So all this is taxable to the hospital because it is not part of healthcare. So renting of shops, auditoriums, which is within the premises of the hospital, or display of advertisement. Now this has become a trend. May various big pharma companies, they put their boards or banners or display their products in the hospital premises, for which obviously the hospital charges them some amount. So all this is the taxable services which is provided, and for that the hospital will obviously have to take registration and also have to pay tax. Now this is again important. Now this is very common, IVF. IVF, I'm sure everybody would understand. It is the again something like that, artificial insemination in case of livestock. So here also, for conceiving a baby, nowadays this IVF has gained a lot of importance. Importance means it has now become very common and you'll find many IVF centers. Now the question is, when anybody is going for that IVF treatment, and because of that IVF treatment, the person gets pregnant. After pregnancy, what is done is part of healthcare, no doubt. But for getting pregnant, when you are taking the IVF, whether that is eligible for exemption, that is what is the discussion. So what it says, as per the definition of healthcare services, it means any service by way of diagnosis, treatment, care of what? Of illness, injury, deformity, abnormality, pregnancy in any recognized system of medicines, includes service by way of transportation, etc., but does not include hair transplant, etc., etc. So they have simply repeated the definition Now the question is, since the abnormality disease ailment of infertility is treated using this ART procedure such as IVF, it is clarified that service by way of IVF are also covered under the definition of healthcare. So what they are saying is that treating the problem of infertility comes in the treatment of some type of disease or deformity, and that is why, because of this, IVF will be eligible for exemption. So when you are taking the IVF treatment because of which the lady conceives, that treatment charges will also be eligible for exemption. I hope this is clear to everyone. Now we move on to the other category, which is services provided by government. Now, generally, it is a confusion, or again, it is, I'll say, a presumption, a misunderstanding that whatever is done by government will always be exempt. Try to recall multiple definitions. First, definition of person. In income tax, the definition of person does not covers government. Go and check in Income Tax Act. However, in GST, the definition of person intentionally covers government. Then comes second, where the definition of supply, section 7, specifically addresses government related activities. Yes, it says that it will be no supply, but when it will be no supply, only when it is notified. It means otherwise it will not be no supply. So indirectly it is hinting that government services, that is services provided by government, until and unless it is notified as a no supply, it will also become a supply. Third is, go to the definition of business. In the definition of business also, the last entry of that definition, section 2 bracket 7, last entry says that where government is doing anything even as a public authority, not as a businessman. Where it is doing as a businessman, there is no doubt the government is covered under the entry. Entry means under the taxability. But even where the government is doing something as public authority. What is a public authority? Where it is not intending to earn something, it is doing it because it is having that power, it is having that authority to do it. For example, you want to set up a factory. For setting up a factory, you have to go to the government authority to take license. Now here, when the government authority is granting you license and taking some fees, this is not a business of the government, but it is doing this as a public authority. So where you go to the government authorities for doing various type of things, where only the government is empowered to do that. Like for example, you want passport, you have to go to government only. Government has set up specific passport office which has a charge fix for getting the passport done. Again, this is not a business of the government in general. Means it is not doing this with the intention of running some type of business entity. It is doing this as a public authority because only government has the authority to do this. So the definition of business says that even though it may not be business in general sense, but because we want to cover this under GST, we are firstly including it in the definition of business. So you'll find that in person, in supply, and in business, specifically reference of government is included to make one thing clear, that even government would be liable for GST. However, having said this, it will include everything done by government in the GST, which the law does not intend. Hence, firstly, everything of government is covered in GST. Then one by one, they have started giving exemptions. So what are the exempt entries? First is service by government authority by way of activity in relation to functions entrusted to municipality. So where the functions that the government is doing is the function of municipality, and where the list of municipal functions are specified, they are specified in Article 243W. Similarly, the functions of panchayat are specified in Article 243G. So these are the two articles of the Constitution, 243W, 243G, where a list of activities to be performed by panchayat or by municipality has been specified. So for these activities, there will be exemption. So whereby doing these activities, like you all pay gharpatti, you all pay property tax, which is levied by municipality. But why is the municipality levying that? Because it is providing you various type of services which are mentioned in 243W. So the Constitution has made the municipal authority do those activities and the government does not want tax on that because it becomes a type of a sovereign function of municipality. Hence, it has been provided exemption. Then, services by central government, state government, union, territory, or local authority, excluding the following. Now, except these, other services would be exempt. In other words, now the names which we are going to read are the taxable service. First is services by post office. So when you go to post office for doing any type of services except very few, the remaining all services of post are taxable. Second, services in relation to aircraft vessel inside or outside the precincts of port or airport. So where now you all know that majority of the ports, airports come under the government administration, though they may have now started privatizing it by giving it to private players, but where these ports, airports are under the government authority, government control, and they are providing services to any aircraft or vessel, that would be exempt. Similarly, transport of goods or passengers by the government would be exempt, and any service other than service covered above provided to business entity. This will also be taxable. So this is the list of services which are taxable. One, post office. Second, activities for aircrafts and vessels. Third, transport of goods and passengers. And four, services which is given to business entities. Correct? Now, since we have come to business entity, I'll first skip these two services. I'll first connect the above point with the next point, which is relating to business activity, business entity. So what we understood from the above exemption, that all services of government are exempt except four. And in that four, what is important is the last one, where the service is given by government to business entity, that would be taxable. However, in that there is an exemption of service where the value of service is up to rupees 5,000. So it is a service given by the government, but the price of that service is up to 5,000. It will be exempt. There is one more exemption relating to business. Okay. Yes, that is entry number 7. So firstly, by this entry, we understood that 4 services of government are taxable: post, aircraft vessel, transport of goods, passenger, and services provided to business. Then this point you should remember, any service of government up to 5,000 will always be exempt. That is why, as I said, when you go to post office, the nominal charge items are always exempt because they are below 5,000. So they will get the exemption benefit. Then comes this entry. Services provided by central, state government, union territory, local territory to a business entity with an aggregate turnover up to such amount in the preceding financial year as makes it eligible for exemption from registration. What it means? So where the government is providing services to business entity, but to a small business entity. Who is a small business entity? Whose turnover in the preceding year is below the registration limit of 20 lakhs, 40 lakhs. So where the government is giving services to small business entity, that is also exempt. However, this entry will not cover services given in ABC. So ABC will always be taxable, like the post office service, the vessel aircraft service, and the transport service. These three will always be taxable. But for the fourth category, that is for business entity, we saw that services given by government to business entity is taxable. But in that, you have this small exemption that where it is a small business entity. That is a turnover in the last year of the business entity is below the registration limit. That is what is exempt. Now here, what will not be covered in exemption? The first 3 services is not covered, and where the government is giving its immobile property on rent. So if the government is giving its immobile property on rent to a business entity, it will always be taxable. So for business entity, you have to remember 3 points. 1, services given by government to business entity is taxable. But if it is a small business entity, that is the turnover of business entity in last year is below the registration limit, then the service given by government to such business entity is not taxable. And third, where the value of the service is not exceeding 5,000, that is also exempt. Then the next one is simple, services given by government to government. So service is given by central state government to central state government. So where one government is giving service to another, that will always be exempt. Then again, this is simple, supply of service by government entity to central government. So where one of the government entities is giving service to government, it will be exempt. Now this is important. Now this is also actually part of 12AA service. So what is the service? The service is of providing old age homes. We now know what is old age home. That is, old age home means Vruddhashram. Now when these old age home is provided either by the government or by a trust which is registered under 12AA or AB, that is what is exempt, provided the fees or the charges per month per person is not exceeding 25,000. So where the per month charges for such Vruddhashram is up to 25,000, it will be exempt, provided this Vruddhashram is run by government, central or state, or it is run by the trust which is covered under 12AA or AB. Then this will be exempt. Next, services by Department of Post by way of postcard, inland letters, book post, ordinary post, envelopes weighing less than 100 grams. Sorry, 10 grams is exempt. As I said, small services of post office is exempt. Then services supplied by central state government, union territory to their undertakings or PSUs by way of guaranteeing their loans. So where the central government stands as a guarantee for the PSUs. So big company, big banks can give them loan. So government is standing as their guarantor. In such a case, the service given by the government to these PSUs is of giving guarantee on their behalf. That is what is exempt. Next, what is exempt is where the service is provided by government. What type of service? By way of registration required under any law. So I was giving example that if you want to start a factory, you require license. Now this license will be given by government, for which let us say there will be some fees. So where the government is charging fees for providing you license under any law, that will be exempt. Second, where the government is charging you fees. Why? Because you need to take some certificate from the government. Like nowadays, because of some incidents, now there are strict rules that if you want to run a restaurant, you should compulsorily have a fire checkup done, and you should have that certificate that your restaurant is fireproof. That it not fireproof means it will not be having major problem if some fire erupts. It has sufficient arrangements. So you need to take certain certificates by getting some testing done. So what are these certificates for? Testing, calibration, safety check, certification relating to protection or safety of workers, consumers, or public at large, including fire license, which is required under any law. So where the government is providing any of these services, of providing you some certificate, and for that again there is some fees, that is exempt. Then what is exempt is issuance of passport, service, visa, driving license, birth certificate, death certificate. Now some of these are exempt, like death certificate and all are already exempt. Exempt means not exempt, sorry, they are free, but wherever there is a charge, that will also be exempt. Next, another thing which is exempt is where the service is provided by government of what nature? By way of tolerating non-performance of a contract for which consideration is in the form of fee, fine, fees, etc. So where you are paying any type of fine or fees to the government, like let us say you file the GST return late or the income tax return late, and there is some fees or fine payable to the government, that will be exempt from GST. There is no GST. Next, where the government has assigned right to use natural resources to farmers for cultivating plants or for rearing life forms of animals. So where the government is giving on royalty certain things to the farmers, and the royalty that it is getting is exempt. Similarly, where the charges is for what? For deputing officers after office hours or on holiday for inspection or container stocking. So this happens in customs, that where you want to clear your goods on some holiday, so you request the department that they provide you officers on holiday, and for that the custom department puts some charge. That charge is exempt. 65B is not relevant, so I'm not covering it. You may ignore that. Then 74A, services provided by rehabilitation professionals recognized under the Rehabilitation Council of India by way of rehabilitation, therapy or counseling and such other activities as are covered under the said act at medical establishment, educational institution, rehabilitation centers, etc., etc., established by the government or the 12AA trust. So where the government or the trust has established what? Any of these. What are these? Rehabilitation centers where the services are provided by rehabilitation professionals. So for rehabilitation of different categories of people, the government has established rehabilitation centers. So where these centers are established either by government or by trust, the services provided by them would be exempt. So these are some of these services relating to government which are having exemption, right? Now we have covered all major category of services. Major means where there was a heavy load of details. Now after this, in our next lecture, we'll be covering those services which are quite small. There are few entries or there are not so much of detailings. But I request that in the meantime, you all study the entire module up to this point. That is up to the point that we discussed today. That is up to the point of services by government. In the next lecture, we'll start from 6th category and I will take up your doubts in the previous category if any. Fine, students. So let us close our session for today. I hope there are no questions or doubts. Yes, perfect. So just keep reading because there are a lot many entries with so many conditions and ifs and buts. So just do a reading once or twice up to entry number 5, not entry number 5, up to category number 5. So that in any of the detailings, if you have any questions, we will discuss that and we will proceed in the next lecture. So for then, thank you very much. Take care. Good night. Bye-bye. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.